Hey everybody, I'm Dan Olsen. I'm super excited to be here with my friend Stephen Cohn, and we just are going to record this talk about how to use data to make better product decisions, and I hope that you find it useful. So with that, Stephen, why don't we jump in? What's the first thing we want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been thinking a lot about this topic about, getting value out of data, right? It's not, I mean, everyone has data, right? And so but like few people, I speak to a lot of product teams. I'm sure, obviously you do as well. And few that I speak to actually get value out of it, like real value. Like I'm not talking like produce a chart to show a boss
Sure.
that, hey, 6% of our users are using this new feature we launched last month. I'm talking like really like change the business, change the product, change like get real insights out of that. And it's a topic I'm very interested in. I think it's like the idea of like somehow mining all that information and turning it into a nugget, like a real insight. And so this is something I think about. I actually think about case studies. There's some thoughts. There's a couple of examples that I want to share of like tools that we use. And I'm like, man, if they were looking at the data, they can make so much more money off of me,
Right,
you know?
right,
And they're not, they're not looking at the data, and they don't really understand what value they're providing to me as a customer, like why I'm
right,
using that product,
right.
and understanding like how they could drive deeper adoption with me, and go from there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's interesting because if we take a step back, we're basically talking, so just to be clear, data could mean quantitative or qualitative data. Some people use it loosely. I think we're talking more about analytics, quantitative data, like product analytics data. And to your point, yeah, I see what you see. I see like and I call it analytics maturity model, where different companies and different teams are at different places, right? Some teams have no analytics at all, right? So we're not even talking about those teams that they're not really using analytics at all. They don't have a good tool in place. The next level up is, hopefully you have some average or above average tool in place, and like a small number of people are looking at it maybe. But to your point, even if you have a tool in place and you have a lot of people looking at it, there's still this idea of you're just getting basic information. You're getting like how many people logged in, how many people looked at this feature, right? So there's that, what's that sophistication? And what really is a level of insight? Now, don't get me wrong, having that versus having nothing is better, obviously. But really what we're getting at, eventually people get to, okay, I'm going to start looking at conversion rates or where are people dropping off. That's a little more advanced analysis. Or, hey, I want to look at retention, right? And so people usually get excited. And just to be clear, we're talking about using the top typical analytical tools like Heap, Mixpanel, Pendo, Amplitude. Those are kind of the things that a lot of people use. Some people have homegrown stuff. Some people are using Google Analytics. We should talk about your tool, Winware, and how it's unique and different too, obviously. But people get excited to get to the retentions like, this is cool. And then the next level is, okay, I've got a single retention curve by cohort. Let me start analyzing, splitting my cohorts on people that took this key action and people that didn't. And that's where we start to get some insights into, hey, this kind of an action leads to retention. But a low percentage, to your point, low percentage of product managers or product teams get to that level of sophistication. And I would also argue a lot of them stop there and they don't go even further to get more insight. So let me flip it back to you and get your thoughts on that kind of, maturity model and where you see companies and how they can be even higher, operate at higher levels.
So I think the way I think about it, and the way I like it's been really productive for me is uh flip it from not like what my product data, and think about it from like the customer's use case, the customer's
Mm-hmm.
need, right? And it's like product management 101 is understand your customer's pain point, figure out a solution to that pain point, right? And that's ultimately what people buy. People buy a SaaS product to solve a problem for them. And I'm talking about SaaS consumer products, e-commerce, stuff like that. Obviously a little different, but for SaaS, it's about solving a specific problem. So there's this one example that's like it makes me chuckle every month. We use Jira. We use the heck out of Jira. We're a small team. We use the heck out of Jira, and we don't pay them anything, zero. I mean, we use it for a lot of stuff. We integrate it with a bunch. We integrate with our SOC 2 tool. We integrate it with some other tools, with Git, but we're on the free plan, and we've never upgraded from them. But every month, I pay for this little app that they have. I pay a fee. That's like a testing app. Jira doesn't even make it. It's some other company makes this little app that is a really small use case, but it's valuable, and like they provide enough value that's worth. When my head of QA said, I want to buy this app, this is the amount of fee. Even as a small startup, I was like, no brainer, sure, go for it. Right, if it's going to save you a couple hours, go for it. Right. But if you think about the value creation to me and my team, this little app that we pay them money every month is like a really small circle of a value creation, right? And Jira is this monster circle of like so much value that they create for our company, but they capture none of it, right? And so the question is like, what does Jira provide to me as like the person who, what's my job to be done? What's my use case, right? And by understanding that and understanding what I want to get out of it as the buyer, as the person who's going to swipe the card or not swipe the card, and grouping product experiences into that, I think you get a better understanding of what's that monetization opportunity.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think what it kind of gets to is you see, startups, when they first launch a SaaS product or service, they have one product offering and one tier. And then over time, to your point, hopefully it solves a specific problem for a specific customer in a good way. And then to your point, over time, you start addressing additional problems. You start realizing, hey, there's like these users, but then these other ones have these more complicated needs. Let's create a higher tier because we're creating more value, that has more features and things like that. So that's a natural evolution over time. It sounds like one of the takeaways from what you're saying is, hey, Jira, the way they've got their tiers is a little not suboptimal because they could be charging. They're creating enough value for you that you would pay, but they're not charging you, which is a balancing act freemium companies have to do between growth and profit. But to your point, the main point I think is just, hey, thinking about it through a customer lens, what pain points are we really solving? What jobs to be done are we solving? What kind of data are we getting on that, as opposed to just just these random product analytics data that we're getting? And then over time, how do you get more sophisticated about your value prop and start to tier it so that you're charging proportional to the value you're creating?
Yeah, and I think that ultimately, I think the point is like a feature is a part of solving a need for a customer. Right. But just simply launching that feature by pushing it into production doesn't necessarily help me as the user understand that thing is going to solve my need. Right. So ultimately, whether it's trial conversions, whether it's a free product forever that's just simply I'm looking for activation rates and engagement, or whether it's retention, whether paid retention or just user retention, it always comes back to, I have a need. Sure. Is this product solving my need? Sure. And as your roadmap, are you building stuff to help me solve my need? And so if you don't know what my need is, and you don't know how your features align to solve your roadmap, both existing in product as well as planned, goes to help me solve my need, it's really hard to know if you're building the right things, right? And to me, that's how data can really help, right? If you can understand, what problems you're solving for your customers, how you're solving them with your product, and are the people. I sit on the board of this company, and I literally had this conversation with the CEO and the head of product earlier this week. They were launching this whole big new initiative, and it sounds great to me as a board member. And they have a lot of customers, but they have this one kind of core ICP that's a percentage of their customer base. And as a board member, I'm like, look, what I want to know is that ICP using those features? Because like that's the bet that we're making as a product strategy is like ultimately like the product strategy that we're in agreement on with the management team as a board is like, if we can add this part to our product, we can differentiate, we can get faster growth, better retention rates, all the good stuff, right? So ultimately, that product set, that feature set is solving a need for a customer. And the only way to know that is if they know that it's that need. Like, hey, we want to solve this need. Is this a need? Yes, we're in agreement. Awesome.
Right.
Here are the features to solve that need. We're demoing it for you. We're showing it to you. Are you using it? Right. And if you're not using it, and we've already established there's a need there, but you're not using it, the question is, why not? It either doesn't solve a need, like you do have the need, but that feature doesn't solve it, or it's not as pressing of a need as you initially thought, or whatever it is. So from a using data perspective, like how to get real value out of data as a product person, that's the way I think about it. I think about it ultimately as like, we're building features to solve problems. Do the people who are customers who have those problems, are they using those features, and are they agreeing with their behaviors, not their words, that it is solving their problem? And by behaviors, I mean, are they continuing to use that feature?
Right. Yeah. I would add a few thoughts just because I think, I'm doing some workshops next week, and I think it's very easy for product managers and product teams to fall into the trap of just shipping, right? What we call outputs over outcomes. Hey, we launched 30 story points. We launched 30 story points. We launched this feature, and people focus on that delivery and that as the accomplishment. And to your point, that's just the point where we've got our hypothesis out there in the wild to see if it really solves a problem or not. And another way that people describe this is, hey, it feels like we're a feature factory. We just crank stuff out, and you're really focused on launching solutions, and it's easy to lose sight of, are you solving problems? And so one thing you brought out, to your point, that is how it's supposed to work. You're supposed to identify a customer problem, supposed to come up with what you think is the best solution, design it, code it, ship it, but you've got to close that feedback loop to know if you really did, and most of the times, despite your best efforts, there's a miss in there somewhere. There's some disconnect, right? And just to tease apart, to your point, to build on what you said, maybe what you're solving isn't really a user need that they had. You thought it was a user need, but you didn't validate it with discovery research. Let's say you validated it with discovery research. To your point, it may not be as big a pain point as some other things, right? And that's where, just to jump in with specific advice, that's where I love to use the importance versus satisfaction framework. I'm not going to get into details. Check out my videos. Once you've brainstormed, hey, there's 10 problems we can solve, there's a question of which ones represent the biggest opportunity to create customer value. And so, the number one thing is like you want to solve higher important problems versus lower important problems, which, by the way, the importance will vary with the target market you're going after, which is part of why the target customer selection matters too, right? And then to your point, I think that, you mentioned behavioral data. Just to take a step back, there's behavioral data, which is what are people actually doing? And there's attitudinal data or information, which is what are people telling you, right? And so if I interview 10 people and I say, how often do you go to the gym? They might tell me once a week, but if I actually watch them, it might be more like once a month, right? And so and I call it like Oprah versus Spock, right? Like Oprah is the qualitative, Spock hates humans because they're illogical. They don't do what they say. They don't say what they do. So behavioral data is kind of the gold standard because it's like you're actually seeing it. And to tie it back to kind of, are you solving a problem? Are you creating customer value? Or in other words, are you achieving product market fit or feature market fit? The simple thought experiment I like to give is, think of all the movies you've seen in your life, probably hundreds, maybe thousands, thanks to Netflix. Now think of the number of movies you've seen like 8 or more times. It's a much shorter list, right? So the movies that you go back and watch again, or the restaurants that you go back to again and again, that's because they're solving a problem for you. They have market fit with you. You see what I mean? Same thing with a feature. Now let's take an analogy to a feature. You launch a brand new feature that you think is going to solve a killer problem for your main target market. You see that a bunch of people behaviorally, you see a bunch of them try it, and then they never come back and use it again. What can you infer from that fact pattern, that behavioral fact pattern? You can infer that, hey, they went in there, they kicked the tires. It didn't do enough for them. It didn't create enough value for them to come back and use it, right? Conversely, and I like to make a funny story here where it's like, imagine we have the world's second worst marketing person in the world. Their conversion rate is not zero, but it's like 0.00001%. After talking to 1 million prospective customers, they finally get one through the conversion funnel. And the person shaking their head going, man, that was a horrible marketing job, but let me just check this product out. If they get in there and they use it, and you see that they come back and use it again and come back and use it again and again, despite the horrible acquisition conversion job, you've got that repeat usage indicates that it's creating enough value for them. So that's the behavioral signal. Repeat usage, just to kind of put a fine point on it, is a behavioral signal that you are solving a real problem, right? That you are creating enough value and that you have product market fit or feature market fit.
Yeah, let me give you a good personal example from my last company. So my last company, Validately, qualitative user research. We ended up selling to UserZoom, successful exit, and then they ended up merging with user testing. So now, like, we were the third biggest, fastest growing, but third biggest. UserZoom was the second biggest, and the user testing was the first biggest in the space. And then that's now all one company.
Right.
But when I was running Validately, we had a churn problem with one customer segment in particular that was really annoying to us and the board. And it was basically that one segment was weighing everyone down. It was basically SMB that came in, SMB accounts, so small accounts based on number of designers they had on their company that came in through a self-serve PLG motion. So anyone who came in through a sales motion had really good retention rates, both GRR and NRR. It was the PLG, particularly the SMB segment. And it was, and so I dug in the data and I did this analysis where I did a correlation between, I picked like 10 features. And I did a correlation analysis between retention rates and those feature usage, like real usage, not like one time click the button. I'm talking like really use the product. And it was a crude analysis. It wasn't like a deep, like, statistically rigorous analysis. But I just wanted to see, is there any kind of patterns in there? And I found there was one feature that we had that it was like the pattern jumped out at me. It was like if people in that segment, users in that segment, used our note-taking feature, they always renewed. Like the retention rate was phenomenal, aligned with our sales-led motion.
Right.
And I was like, well, that's interesting. So I interviewed those customers. I reached out to them, and as you say, qualitative and quant. So I used the quant to create the signal, and then I used the qualitative to reach out to them, and I interviewed them. I said, why is that? Tell me what is creating this deeper connection for you? Why are you renewing? And they said basically, it changed the perception of the product for them. It solved a bigger job to be done, a bigger need, which was my research hub. So now not only did I have my videos, my usability videos and my user research in there, but my notes and my thoughts and all my content was in there too. And it became a deeper product than just a usability test that I'll throw away, right, when I'm done, once I update the design and ship it. And so that's where the light bulb went out. So then I interviewed a bunch of customers who didn't use that feature. I was like, okay, well, why not? Why are you not using this feature? And like, you have to take notes, right? And they're like, yep, we take notes. I was like, okay, well, where are you putting your notes? Well, in like a Google Doc or whatever. And I was like, well, that's crazy because that's like extra work, right? Like now you have a different tool. You're creating more. You could do it right here. You're using multiple tools trying to sync up. Like, why are you doing it that way? And it was a bunch of usability stuff, and small product stuff. So we started improving the product stuff, and then we started promoting it more with an onboarding guide and an email sequence. And we saw a change in behavior and a change in retention rates. So people in that segment were using it more, and the retention rates were improving. So much so that we decided we were going to kind of redesign the entire experience around note taking. When we ended up, we were like literally designing that as we got acquired. But the learning point there is that that feature fit into a customer's job to be done. And that job to be done was not just get a usability test, right? The job to be done was to really understand and organize all of my thinking around the product experience, right? So there's some video, there's my thoughts, there's my notes, my content, there's clips, there's highlight reels, there's all these other things. Where having it all in one place created this deeper product connection and doing that. And it started with an analytical analysis that led me to my customer discovery calls.
That's awesome. Yeah, like you said, sometimes you start in quant and you see there's some smoke, but you don't know what's causing the fire or the issue, and then you go to qual and you figure out why. I think that's awesome. And it's also interesting that the journey of how you solve additional problems or bigger problems is iterative, right? You wouldn't have been able to get there if you didn't have the basics of, hey, we can help you run a usability test. It's almost like the new benefit was a higher level benefit, right? And I remember when you were working on Validate, at some point it was described as like an insights platform. I'm like, oh wow, that when you call it an insights platform, now it's not just about the tactics of getting a usability test done. It's about that broader vision, and you can create more value. So I think that's great. But the interesting thing is you almost kind of like got to get something out there so then you can then from there discover. And the key is you got to listen. You got to listen. And a lot to the customers you get, and the ones you don't get are the ones that use a feature and the ones that don't use a feature. Exactly like you did, which is great, right? I often use a fishing analogy. Like when you launch a new product or feature, you're trying to catch a certain fish. And then if you got to look and see, well, which fish did we catch? Why didn't we catch the fish that we thought? Let's go interview all those fish and figure it out. So that's great. Yeah, that's awesome. Any other insights or techniques or tools to help with that?
I'll give you another. Yeah. I'll give you another example of like another case study. I'm a CEO of a startup, so information security is an important thing for us. And I actually spend money. I'm a budget holder and a spender of money for information security. And we have SOC 2 compliance, and we do all that. And I use a platform called it used to be called Leica. It's now called ThoroughPass to do SOC 2 compliance, and I spend a fair amount of money on that. And there was this other product that we were working with actually as a customer, and they had this free, it was a freemium model, and it was for information security, and it was basically you can create this kind of external badge that said they do some external scans of your site or your product, and you can create this external badge, and that's free. And then they have all these features that they're constantly shipping new features that are on a paid plan. And for the life of me, I've clicked around, but for the life of me, I couldn't figure out what problem they solved for me. I couldn't understand what I'm sure they did. Right. I'm sure they were created to solve a specific problem, but I didn't understand what that was.
Right.
And so if they asked me, Stephen, do you feel like all your information security needs are met? I'd say no. Stephen, are you willing to spend money to improve information security if we can show you how this could benefit you? Yes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you know how these features that we are building actually can do that for you? No, I don't.
Right.
And by the way, they never asked me what my needs are.
Sure.
Never.
Sure. Yeah.
I think that asked me in my sign up. Yeah.
I think that touches on a couple things. One is that final layer, like if you're solving the right need and it's solving a need and it's important enough, and you picked the right functionality and you did a good job on the UX, let's assume all those boxes are checked. There's one final layer where you can fall down, which is the messaging. If you can't communicate what this feature is supposed to do for somebody, what problem it's going to solve. And unfortunately, again, most product teams are so busy building stuff, even if they have a high bar for UX design. So, usability issues can cause trouble, or UX issues, but that final thing is messaging. And how do you, if you're not explaining it, one of my favorite funny quotes somebody said once is like, hey, we've got this this yummy food that we want to sell you. It's called dead chicken parts. Do you want to buy some dead chicken parts? But if you call it Kentucky Fried Chicken, it's like a lot better, right? So it's like the messaging, unfortunately, it matters. Unfortunately, it matters.
Right.
And that's the thing, is part of having the insights into the problem is making sure you're addressing it. So not only using the behavioral data on the usage, like we were talking about, but even like showing them a landing page about the new feature or how you plan to talk about it to get feedback. And the good news is messaging is the easiest thing in the world to change. There's no code. It's just text. There's no UX to change. It's like you using some word and they don't get what you mean. And then you say, well, how would you say it? And then you get that. So your other point, the lack of asking users, well, how can we help you? What are your problems? I feel like that's one where, not to make excuses, but it's like, if you imagine, and there's probably just ways to do it. If you imagine, if you went to some new websites, like, hey, what problems do you want to solve? An open-end text box wouldn't be that great, because then someone at the company's got to make sense of all that, although maybe with ChatGPT it's a little easier now. But what happens over time, I think, is good companies realize, hey, there's like 3 different segments and they've got these kind of main problems. And so in a UX smooth way, they try to ascertain which segment are you in, which problems do you have, right? So they can steer you the right way and message things the right way. But yeah, it's funny because people just got to put it out there, put their features out there. They don't think about messaging, and they don't think about asking people, right? So it's just, and it's interesting because at a high level, you've got delivery, which is what we're talking about, people just shipping, and you've got kind of discovery where you're more trying to figure these kind of things out. We're talking about what are the real problems? How do people think about it? How should we talk about it? The good news is in the last several years, the importance of discovery has kind of gone up, but still there, again, is like a bell curve of product teams and how good a job they're doing on discovery. And there's still plenty of teams that are so focused on delivery. And I understand why. A lot of them, they have short-term results. They're understaffed. They just have as much. Some of them would like to spend more time in discovery, but feel like they can't do it. Other people are just in a situation where they don't appreciate the importance of that discovery. So, yeah.
My favorite example is Monday.com. And anyone who listens, if you have not signed up for Monday.com recently or ever, I highly recommend just going through the onboarding experience. It is, in my opinion, perfection. Because Monday.com, what is Monday.com? Okay, Monday.com is basically this UI on top of this structured database. There's like unlimited number of use cases you could do it, right? There's sales use cases, there's product use cases, there's engineering. There's so many different things. And if they just let you just sign up and come in,
right,
their activation rate would be terrible. No one would use it. It would be huge fall off, even though they had this massively powerful product that can solve all these different needs really elegantly. So what do? When you go through the sign up process, you have to answer a bunch of questions, and it starts with, and they ask, and they say something brilliant in their thing. Is they say, what do you want to do first? First, not what are 10 things you want to do. What do you want to do first? What's the number one thing that we can help you with? And you select like sales and marketing or product management or development or whatever. And then there's another question. Okay, what within development can we help you with first? What's the use case that we can solve for you first, right?
Right.
And they ask you one more follow-up question to get you more specific based on your answer. And then they put you into that part of the product right away. Like they move you into that part of the product with a specific onboarding guide. And while, yes, some people might skeptically say, well, they have a huge growth team, I can't afford that, whatever it is. You can afford to ask 2 questions in a sign-up process. What's your role and what's your goal? What do you want to achieve with our product?
Right.
Now, if I told you your activation rate was 42%, you'd say that's not good. 42% of my users, so 58% of my users are not doing well. If I told you that for you actually deliver 3 use cases, and for people who come in with use case A, your activation rate is 78%. For B, 65%. For C, 63%. And for people who come in and say they don't know what their use case is, it's 22%. And that 22% is actually driving your overall product activation rate down.
Right.
That actually changes your perspective, right? If you look at it from just an activation rate, you're like, that's That's 48%, not very good, right? But if you look at a blended perspective, if you look at it of like, how are you solving the specific use cases like money.com is saying? So I know that, I'm sure, I've never been inside, I would bet money that money.com's analytics or product team knows the activation rate and conversion rate for every one of those use cases they ask in their sign up. So they know how the product features align to those use cases.
Right.
They know the activation and conversion rate for those use cases, and they know by being specific up front how they can actually drive business impact. And they know what they need to build for, what they need to improve on.
Right.
But if you just look at high level numbers, our signups this month is X, our conversion rate is Y, our activation rate is Z, and it's just all in one grouping.
Right. Right.
That's not how customers think.
Right.
Customers think, I need this product for this pressing need right now. Right. And product doesn't think that way, in a lot of cases. And if you go through onboardings, it's generic. And so, so from a product perspective, how do you know if you're solving customer needs without this concept of this structure of like features solve needs?
Yeah. So what you're bringing, a couple things, takeaway points for that. One is onboarding is important. I mean, that's another trend you've seen over the last 10 plus years. People realize onboarding is important. You can't just throw a user in there, especially if you have a general purpose tool like monday.com. If you have a general purpose tool or like Evernote or something is like, hey, you can use this in 1,000 different ways, all the more reason. But the thing you're touching base on now, which is really important, is this, we want to focus on problems and then we want to build features that solve them, is actually like making sure you have clear mapping. And so this is what I talk about. Do you have a clear problem space definition? Like, do you have that?
Yes.
These are the 3 problems we're solving for people right now. Obviously, over time, we'll go deeper in how good a job we do in each of those. We'll add more, right? So the quintessential example I always talk about is TurboTax, right? TurboTax helps you with your taxes. At the end of the day, there are 3 kind of high-level, evergreen, persistent benefits, customer problems or benefits that they're going to provide. One is they're going to save you time, right? Hey, if you do it by hand, it's going to take you 5 days. You do your taxes with TurboTax, it's going to take you 5 hours. And then there's a million things they can do to save you time, and they're constantly finding new ways. Hey, what's taking people the longest time? We've saved people a lot of time, but now when they do their tax on TurboTax, what's still taking them the most time? So you can constantly beat that down and keep hitting that, right? Like an example of that would be, gosh, how can we help people get their refunds faster instead of waiting for the IRS? So actually created a product, refund anticipation loans, to get your money faster, right? And they take a little cut. That came out of that desire. The other one is they can help you. The other high level benefit is they save you money by identifying deductions you didn't know about. Hey, did you know you could write this off? Or compared to a CPA, how much it costs, they save you money. That's another macro thing. And so they're constantly trying to find new ways to save you money. And then the third is more of those are kind of functional benefits. The third is more of a emotional benefit of, hey, you feel more confident in your taxes and you feel more empowered because why should you know the tax law? Well, most people, if they had to do taxes on their own, their eyes would glaze over. They'd be anxious. Like, I don't know if I'm doing this right. I'm probably making a mistake. They're going to come send me a penalty. But, TurboTax just has this nice wizard that guides you through, holds your hand, asks you questions. Next thing you know, you're done. But taking a step back, that is their problem space definition. We save people time on their taxes. We save them money on their taxes. We make them feel better about their taxes. And that's an evergreen value prop that they can keep going back to the well and doing a better and better job. So that's that global thing you're talking about. What's our global blueprint? Are we clear as an organization? What are those high-level jobs or benefits that we are trying to solve? And to your point, how good a job are we doing on each of them? And by the way, it's a function of the segment, right? And so to your last point, which I think is great, is if you're just looking at global data, global metrics, you're missing the whole thing. And to go back to this fishing analogy, imagine you've caught like thousands of fish and you're just looking at, the average of all those. Well, there's some fish that really have this one use case, really want to save time and they really value it. There are other fish that really want to save money and they really value that. And so you got to really kind of analyze where are you doing the best job as a function of the segment on each of these. It's almost like a 2x2 of here's the problems, here's the segments. You could do like red, yellow, green. How good a job are we doing on each segment for each problem kind of a thing? and systematically over time, turn the red to yellow, turn the yellow to green, create more value, over time.
You were the first person I heard talk about problem space, and this was like 15 years ago when we first met. And I've been in love with that phrase, and I've repeated it with attribution many times. So my good friend Dan Olsen, who you should buy his book, the Lean Lean Product Playbook, is a genius at understanding this concept of like understanding the problem space. And what I think is interesting is that if you speak to 1,000 product managers, I think you would go 1,000 for 1,000 who would agree with you that you got to define the problems you're solving from a product management perspective, right? And then you say, okay, we're in agreement. We're in total agreement. Now talk to me about how you think about looking at data.
Right.
Do you think about data from a problem perspective? Like when you do a feature release, it's you talked about messaging. I think product announcement emails that I get on a consistent basis are absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
You know why they're terrible? Because all they do is talk about feature.
Sure.
And customers don't care about feature. Customers care about, what does this do for me?
Right.
Why am I actually not just hitting delete before I open it? Like, what problem are you solving for me? How are you helping my job be easier, my day be easier? If I told you we have this new feature where you can calculate different tax, things and whatever, you're like, I don't know what that is. If I told you we have this, we just released 4 different ways to save you an extra 20 minutes from creating your taxes.
Right.
Now I'm interested.
Right.
I wanted to save 20 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Did I want that other thing? That's just a mechanism to save me 20 minutes. What I want as a customer is to save 20 minutes, right? Because I have to do this thing every year. And last year was I felt like it took me a long time. You just came up with 4 new things to save me 20 minutes. I want to know what those 4 things are. But if you come up with, you announce a product of like, here's a new feature we have. Like, what does that do for me? What's the benefit of that? Why am I going to watch a 4-minute video on it, right? And so, the problem space, jobs to be done, it's all the kind of same concept, which is, but to me, when you ask like, how do product people get value out of data, right? Which bringing it back to that initial question that we started this conversation. To me, that's the answer. The answer is as a product person intuitively that you need to solve problems, and you're building features to solve those problems, but you have to keep that concept of grouping it from this thing that we created as a team, designed, researched, designed, coded, tested, pushed to production, and measured, is the point of it was to solve this customer need, right?
Yeah.
And ultimately, does it help those customers with those needs use our product better? And I think if you group it that way, it totally changes the perspective of what the point of the data you're looking at.
Yeah. I think the challenge is, sadly don't think 100% of product managers are fully cognizant that they should be starting with problems, because you've got people that have never worked in a place like that and they're being told to ship. So I don't think, sadly, it's not 100%. So that's one issue leading to this. The other is, even if you get it, even if you get it as a PM, I think what can happen, not to make excuses, is as the ideas go through the product development pipeline and as they go to dev, especially if you've got silos, right? If PM's throwing it over the wall, putting it in Jira, and there's not really good collaboration, a lot of the devs are at the end of that food chain just coding what they're asked to code, and they don't know why. They don't know how it's supposed to help a customer. and then it's like on to shipping the next thing. So part of it is, does your organization value that feedback loop? Like after we launch something, do we actually want to take the time to see if it had the desired effect? Did it help customers the way we want? Did we get the adoption rate that we wanted, right? And sadly, a lot of teams are just so focused on moving on to the next sprint or the next feature, they don't reflect. And we can make excuses or reasons why, a lot of times it's resources, a lot of times it's time, but a lot of times it's anyway. So it's just, that's, I think also, unfortunately, leads to that.
You're 100% right. And I hear this constantly as a frustration point for product teams where they feel like they're not, even the ones who get it don't have the authority or power to drive that.
Yeah.
And so what I would do is look, if you're arguing we should build this feature over that feature, my favorite quote is like the Jim Barksdale quote, who is the CEO of Netscape. He said, when it comes to this, he said, if we have data, let's look at data. If all we have is opinions, let's go with mine.
Right.
And
totally.
that's basically how, a lot of product decisions are made. But I'll tell you this, if I told you that, that's fine, we could build that feature, but I just want you to know this, a piece of information. 25% of our customers sign up and they say that the most pressing need is use case A. Our activation and conversion rate for use case A is 30% below industry standard. And last month, by our development effort, we only allocated 5% of our development effort towards use case A. Yeah. Simply by creating a tag in Jira or whatever your dev tool is, to say which use case, which problem are we solving, right? Yeah. So we have, what problem are we solving? What problem do we solve for customers? What's their activation conversion rate or retention rate or whatever it is based on when they sign up, what that need is. And then how does that map to our development resources? Right. And when you look at the mismatch, it's like, we can build that feature. I'm just telling you, we're not spending resources to actually convert what is 25% of our users say is the most important use case for them when they sign up. Sure. And it's our lowest conversion rate. And if we just got up to industry standard conversion rate, it would mean X dollars to us.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. And this is RICE, right? And people talk about the RICE model and stuff like that. Right. It's like ultimately, but I ask people, how do you figure out what to put into RICE? It's like, I put my finger down. I have no idea. Right. Impact score. What's that impact? But it is measurable. You can actually measure it. You can actually understand what percent of your users prioritize which of your dominant use cases. What's your conversion rates or activation rates for that cohort? Right. It's not hard to do that if you have the right, product and or approach to it. And then, to create a simple tag in Jira to understand, what your development resource or whatever dev tool you use, whatever development resources are putting towards it, it connects the dots. And then it's a different product conversation.
But unfortunately, what you're describing is a very high level sophistication of a product thing, because one, it assumes we know what our product strategy is. We've got alignment, that clear alignment I just shared in TurboTax. Now ask the question, what percentage of organizations have that clear alignment about the top level problems they're trying to solve for customers? Unfortunately, it's low. The second thing is, and part of it is, to your point, they're not more data driven, they're more opinion driven. And you have all these stakeholders that have ideas for the features that we should build. And oftentimes product managers are not empowered to do discovery, and they're just order takers. And the other thing that happens is they can never say no. You end up with this long list for your roadmap of way more than we can do. By the way, estimating things on a monthly or quarterly basis, most companies are not strong at that. So you end up with this roadmap of here's the 20 things we think we can do this quarter. The level of confidence that you can actually get 20 or even 15 or even 10 of those done is very, very low. And then your last point is a great point, is resource allocation. Like the number of companies that actually ensure that the resource allocation is in line with their product strategy is quite low, right? So now we're talking about a higher level muscle that frankly doesn't live at the product manager level. It lives at the VP product, CPO, head of engineering level. Like, are we clear on our strategy? Are we aligning our resource allocation with our strategy or not? So those are really important points. Again, I love the way you're describing. It's like, hey, let's tie it all together. Are we clear on the problems we're going to solve for companies, our product strategy, and how we're going to be better and different than the competition? Right, cool. Are we clear on how much resource, how we're doing on each one right now based on engagement metrics or whatever, right? On a use case by segment basis. And then are we clear on how much we want to invest to close gaps or improve those? And then having that continuous feedback loop on, like, some periodic basis, quarterly. The number of companies that are doing all those steps really well is low. Obviously, companies are getting better and people are trying to do a better job. But I think when you look at a lot of successful companies, that's why they were successful, is because they're doing exactly the things that we're talking about, taking those steps to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, no question. I just think that sometimes I talk to people and they do exactly as you described. And I say, like, flip it. Think of yourself as a customer. Why do you buy a product?
Yeah. Right.
Right?
Right. Yeah.
Like, you buy a product because you go to the site. I mean, I'm not even talking e-commerce. I'm talking like a SaaS product or whatever, but you go to the site and you see that it solves a specific need. Like, there's a list of use cases or solutions, and you're like, I need that one. That's what I need. Yeah. Now, if you log in and you figure out how the product actually solves that one need, you're going to pay for it because you need it, right?
Yeah.
So awesome. Well, I'm sure we could talk for hours on this. It's obviously something that we've thought a lot about, but let's have another chat and another conversation.
Sounds great. Yeah, no, definitely there's a lot of passion and interest here. And hopefully the thoughts we share and the advice we share are helpful to you on your product team. And you can try to make improvements in these areas that we're talking about, getting clear about your product strategy, getting clear about the problems, getting clear on, kind of like, what does success for this feature mean? How do we measure how it's doing against a use case? How are we doing on resource allocation? Hopefully these ideas will help you and your team have better success with your features and products. So Stephen, thanks a lot for taking the time. It's been a great discussion. We'll talk some more about other interesting topics as well.
Awesome, buddy.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephen. Bye.